Okay, let's call to order the December 8th regular meeting of the Calaveras County Planning Commission and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And do we have any staff announcements today?
Madam Chair, yes, we do. We will not be having a Planning Commission meeting on December 22nd. I was working on two projects that I thought would be finalized by the 22nd, but we're not going to be ready for them. So, Merry Christmas.
Yes.
Okay. And agenda changes?
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, you may have received the latest version of the item on today's agenda. I don't know if you had an opportunity to kind of go over it, but if you need a summary of what the changes are, I can kind of go over them.
I think we can hold that for the item. It's just
yes.
if there was a change
Yeah,
to
but no change to the order of the agenda because there's only one item.
Thank you. Then this is an opportunity for the public to comment on any item not on the agenda today, but in the interest area of the Planning Commission. And Annette, is there anybody online?
There's no online public comment at this time.
Thank you. So seeing nobody in the audience, except I assume folks that are here for the agenda item, and nobody online, we will open and close the public comment period and move on to the consent agenda. We have 2 minutes of from the meetings of November 3rd and November 10th. Is there any member of the commission or the public who would like to pull an item from the consent agenda for further discussion?
Well, I do have some suggestions for the minutes of November 3rd. Whether you want to handle those now or pull it or what?
I think we can just go ahead and talk about them.
Okay. Since the agenda item was an informational item, I don't know if, I assume that it still is part of the regular agenda, but I think maybe it should be labeled as informational item right at the somewhere in the heading of the agenda item. Then I would suggest replacing "in compliance" at the very beginning with the word "consistent." Since Senate Bill 32 does not require counties to do this, but has certainly provided incentives for counties to do it. And then down on 1, 2, 3, 4th line, replace "compliance" with "consistency." And then at the bottom of that entry for that agenda item, staff and commission resume discussion on the item. Even though we did not reach a vote, I think it would be good to put in the minutes a memorandum will be prepared for the consultants with consensus suggestions derived from the commission's discussion. So there's some sort of conclusionary statement.
Commissioner Laddish, could you repeat that one more time, please?
I certainly will. A memorandum will be prepared for the consultants with consensus suggestions derived from the commission's, apostrophe S, discussion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And those are my suggestions.
Does anybody have any comments on those?
Is that discussion singular or plural?
Singular.
I had one additional suggestion, if my memory is correct. I think that Mr. Pedro told us that additional measures would be developed with the consultants and sent to the commission. So it's not like we're supposed to be doing something ourselves right now.
Correct.
If my recollection is correct, I think that might be helpful to put in. I do agree with Commissioner Laddish's suggestions.
Right. I believe that our understanding is that the consultants would review what we return to them and come back to us with an updated calculation and, if necessary, additional measures for consideration by the commission. Is that everybody else's understanding? I think that would be
Absolutely.
great to be captured in the minutes.
Okay.
And how do you want that worded? I'm sorry, I barely hear Commissioner Wooster.
Well, mine was very simple, was reflected that I think Mr. Pedro said that additional measures would be developed by the consultants and in return to the commission.
Would be developed? I'm sorry, I could barely hear you.
Yes. That's what he said, developed by the consultants for further consideration by the commission.
Annette, I can help you with that after I can email you the
Okay,
language.
I think I got it, but thank you very, very much.
And then there was your suggestion. I don't know if she got that.
Same basic,
Okay.
the simple version is good for me. Does anybody else have any corrections, comments, suggestions for the minutes? Then I think we are open to a motion to approve the consent agenda with the suggested modifications to the minutes.
Public comment?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, is there any member of the public who would like to comment on the minutes? Actually, because we offered them the opportunity to remove the minutes for further discussion, but we don't have anyone, right, Annette?
Right.
Correct.
So the public comment on the consent agenda has been opened and closed.
We also have the November 10th minutes.
Well, I thought we were talking about both of them. It's one
Oh, okay.
agenda item.
I recused myself from the November 10th.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
Yeah, I move to approve both sets of minutes as amended.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. A motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
With the
And
recusal for the 10th.
any opposed? None. Passes 500. Thank you. It's the end of the year. Then it is time for our regular agenda item 1, 2022-047, modification to existing permit for 2005-190 TSTM North Vista Plaza. This item was continued from November 10th. And Gabriel, are you going to
Yes.
lead this? Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this item was, the request is a modification to a specific condition of approval for a vesting map that was approved back in 2008. LGI Homes, the new owners, filed a request to modify condition of approval 11-9 for Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 08-023, which approved the vesting tentative subdivision tract map 2005-190 and road modification for North Vista Plaza. The project is a residential subdivision on 31.94 acres located approximately 1.75 miles south of Highway 12, Highway 26 intersection in Valley Springs. On January 2, 2008, the supervisors conditionally approved the vesting subdivision map to create 167 lots consisting of 156 residential lots, 2 on-site detention basins, 7 landscaped areas, 2 recreational areas, in addition to private streets. The map was initially approved for 3 years, then was eligible for 6 years of state-granted extensions. LGI Homes is in the process of purchasing this project. They intend to record the final map in a single phase and build out the subdivision, offering finished homes for sale. LGI Homes with Rick Engineering have been diligently working with the county toward completing the COA that must be met prior to approving the final map for recordation. So today, discussing condition 11-9, which reads as follows. Prior to approval of a final subdivision map, the applicant will enter into a recordable agreement with the county to commit 5 housing units to be sold at an average sales price of $200,000. These units would be sold to buyers meeting bona fide low-income limits as set by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Deed restrictions will be placed on the units so that resale prices to future buyers will be indexed over 30 years to low-income limits set by HCD. In August of this year, LGI Homes submitted a request to modify this condition to remove the average sales price of $200,000 and set by HCD because the price of an average home in the county has increased over the last 16 years. In 2022, for example, the low income for a family of 4 was $55,750. Therefore, the amount of home a low-income family can qualify for has actually gone up. The intent of condition 11-9 at the time was to provide affordable housing opportunities to lower-income households. Lower income is identified by HCD as household incomes that are within 80% of the average median income of the county and below. With the price set at $200,000, it doesn't really allow for consideration of fluctuation in income levels and also the price of homes and inflation. In your staff report, you find Calaveras County income limits of 2022 that shows that with 80% AMI for a household of 4, the income would be about $72,000, and this dictates the amount of home a person in that income category or a family in that income category can actually purchase. So the average cost of a home in Calaveras County is listed as $370,000. Condition 11.9 is targeting lower income affordability which is 80% of the AMI or less. Table 2 in the staff report shows that affordability varies on household size and unit size. So, for example, for an affordable 3-bedroom home for a family of 4 and an AMI of 80%, defined by HCD as low income, the current value for a home for them would be around, or what they would qualify for would be around $300,000, which is $100,000 more than the sale price set by condition of approval 11-9 in 15 years ago. The developer estimates that the project will be complete and homes will be ready for sale by 2025. HCD updates the AMI and affordability information for Calaveras County annually. So it is very possible that by 2025, what the AMI would be for the county might even be different from where we are today. So the proposed amendment to condition 11-9 is that it would read as follows. Prior to approval of a final subdivision map, the applicant will enter into a recordable agreement with the county to commit 5 housing units to be sold to buyers, meeting bona fide low-income limits as set by California Department of Housing and Community Development. Deed restrictions will be placed on the units so that resale prices for future buyers would be indexed over 30 years to low-income limits as set by HCD. Now, what you do not see in that condition is a specific price. So we're tying the price of the homes to the low-income section of the population at the time of the final map recordation. The number of required affordable housing units will remain the same, 5, and they would still need to fit the definition of low income set by HCD. The amendment would allow the changing times and will allow for changing times and changing prices and fluctuations in the market. And also, as far as the condition of approval relates to the environmental document that was prepared for the original application. The environmental review was a mitigative negative deck at the time, and the mitigative negative declaration adopted for the project at the time of project approval adequately addressed project-related, potentially significant environmental impacts. It is the opinion of staff and county council that changing this particular language in the condition of approval doesn't trigger a significant change in CEQA analysis. Therefore, we do not have to process an addendum to the original mitigative negative deck. However, a copy of the mitigative negative deck has been provided with the revised staff report that you have in front of you. So in conclusion, modifying this condition to remove the specific selling price of $200,000 and allowing HCD to determine the affordable home sales price based on household income levels at the time of purchase will increase the eligibility of all low-income buyers. Modifying the condition does not change the project and still meets the initial intent of condition 11-9. That ends my presentation, and I'm sure you would have conditions because we already received 2 pieces of information from Commissioner Ladish, and I think the applicants are here in the audience. They will be able to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
I'm sure we have questions.
I have questions.
Very good.
Go ahead.
The request is just to remove the $200,000 sales price limit,
Yes.
and the resolution does exactly that.
Okay.
But I don't see anywhere in the resolution a mechanism for setting the price to replace the $200,000 limit. What's there defines the eligibility
Right.
of the buyers, but it doesn't say anything about the price. So they could charge whatever they want to. If some low-income buyer can afford it somehow, maybe, grandma gives them a gift or whatever, then they would get that higher price. So if we're going to do something like this, it seems to me the mechanism for setting the price over time has to be in the condition in place of the $200,000 limit.
If I could break in, I'm making a suggestion for just such a mechanism, which we'll discuss later.
Okay. Commissioner Wooster, are you suggesting that we take some of the analysis that talks about affordability and family size and so on and so forth and include that in a resolution? Because that is the only basis that we would have to determine what a low-income family of four with an 80% AMI would be able to qualify for, and that would indirectly then become the price that they would have to pay. Remember this, though, there's going to be deed restrictions filed with this as well, so they would be limited to the rules and regulations regarding how much they can actually charge. It would not be one of, because there's only 5 of these units that would be affected by this, not the entire development. So they can charge whatever they want for all the other units, but for 5 of these units, they would have to be based on, affordability, low income, and we don't know what that would be by the year 2025.
I
That's
think
just
what
I'm
he's saying is that we have defined who a low-income buyer is. What we haven't done is define that
What
the
the price.
maximum sales price will be determined by these same criteria.
Exactly.
Okay. So a little modification to that would be appropriate.
And I think that's also
Well,
part of
that-
what Tim's
My suggestion.
Right.
suggestions were.
Okay.
Before we get to Tim's, do you have more?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Table 3 on page 5 of the staff report sets forth the state's regional housing needs allocation, call it RHINA, I guess, goals for Calaveras. Were those allocations in effect in 2008?
The regional housing allocations? No, because the our RENA numbers are tied specifically to our housing element cycle. And each housing element cycle, it's either a 6-year cycle or an 8-year cycle. So in this particular cycle, we're looking at 2019 through 2027, so it's an 8-year cycle. So we have to go back 2019, maybe another 8 years, it would be 2011, and then, so we have to go back several housing element cycles to figure out what the total number of housing units at that time were that we were required to provide. But it's tied into housing elements.
Okay, this table shows the allocations of housing units by income level
Yes.
categories, and by units actually built for the years 2019 to 2021. Now, what can happen to a county that doesn't meet its RENO allocation goals?
Well, that's a very good question. The RENA numbers are always highly controversial. They are set as guidelines for us. If we do not meet them, then our obligation is that we roll those numbers forward, and then they give us additional numbers. So it's kind of we fall behind in kind of a deficit fashion if we consistently do not meet our RENA allocation numbers. I haven't seen any drastic penalties for communities that do not meet their RENA analysis. But at the same time, some communities who feel that their RENA allocation numbers are onerous have a process whereby they can appeal. There's a set of rules and guidelines where you can go before HD and say, there's no way we can do this because we have demonstrated to you that we have done all we can with zoning, we have increased densities, we have, down zone, we have up zone, we've done all these things, and there's no way we can actually meet those housing numbers. So there is a process we can go through. It's kind of the same thing with when you're not updating your general plan on time. There are potential penalties, but they often do not really happen.
Okay, the staff report points out the county has achieved 18.8% of its RENA goal, but that includes all units, doesn't it?
Yes.
And if you take the total very low income and income units built, which is like 18, and divide that by the total allocated, which is 268 plus 178 is 446, we've achieved only 4% of the allocation for the low and
For
very
the
low.
low income category, yes.
Okay, and then if you take the state allocation numbers for very low and low income, that's the 446 number, and divide it by the total units of 1,096, that gets you a percentage of 41% the state thinks ought to be allocated to very low and low income.
Right.
And what we have here is condition 2-9 requires an allocation of 5 units out of 156 for low-income people. That's about 3.2%. So there's kind of a disconnect between what the state is saying we should be doing and what we're doing.
Well,
You should stick around for our next housing element update.
Commissioner Worcester, let me remind you that this condition is a carryover from 2008.
Right.
So for your argument, we need to go back and look at how we fared compared to our 2008 numbers. If we were building, were we at 18.8% based on the number of housing units that were allocated to the county for that particular housing cycle. So this particular condition approval should be tied to and looked at through the spectrum of 2008 conditions, incomes, RENA numbers, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have that. So all we can do is, because by the time this project is completed, it will be 2025, this project would be within our current housing element. Therefore, we can look at the income through that lens. However, we have not required any kind of modification to the number of housing units from 2008. And if that is the direction, is that the direction I think you're going? Is that 5 out of 156, should we increase the number of affordable units from 5 to correlate to the percentage of compliance? Is that kind of how you're thinking?
If you're going to change the maximum sale price because of changed conditions since 2008, why would you not be also looking at the number of affordable housing units that ought to be provided
All right,
because of those same changed conditions?
right.
And
I don't think those conditions actually have changed, having been involved with, I don't know how many previous housing elements. There has never been a time when we have met our goals that I recall. Somebody else may have been around longer and recall, but I don't. And also, there has never been an explicit requirement for inclusionary housing in new housing developments. That's always been resisted also, so it's been on the basis of negotiations with individual developers. Basically looking at the size of the development, scope of the development, and the opportunities for different housing types within that development. But I think there's a basic fairness issue here in that their maps have been extended based on the 5. And I think to make a significant change to the percentage of affordable housing units to be included would be a substantive change to that map, actually.
And
That's just my perspective on it.
And I have to agree, and that might have to be reflected in the CEQA documentation as well. So it might seem logical to look at the number 5. However, I think that would be more than just a minor modification. That would be almost something that I would consider to be structural, because now we have to go back and try to figure out how did we come up with 5 out of 156 or however many number of units there were at the particular time. I don't know if those numbers were proportional to the total number of housing units that were being provided or requested at the time. But I think this approach, if we kept the number at 5 and looked at what the prevailing market prices would be, because what is problematic with 11-9 is that it was very specific. You have to sell the homes at $200,000. And $200,000 may have been a fair price in 2008. Today, on the other hand, $200,000 may not be a fair price as reflected by all the things that we've talked about earlier.
Commissioner Worcester, do you have other areas that you want us to consider?
No. The only other thing would have to do with the resolution, and that it's a simple question whether we ought to be approving a modification or recommending that the board approve it.
Could you say that again, please? We were having a sidebar while you were. Could you?
He's just commenting, are we the approving body, or are we making a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors?
You are actually the recommending body for this. It doesn't go to the Board of Supervisors unless appealed. I don't just to say, I don't see any legal issues with the comments that are being made. I think it's more at this point of a policy call, and I just also want to clarify that the position that is being asserted with respect to CEQA would not change based on the change of the condition, because the reason that the county is asserting that CEQA isn't affected is that home prices do not touch on any CEQA impact category, so it doesn't change the project within the meaning of CEQA.
Right.
So I have a few questions.
I
Surprise.
think if you could hold yours and let these guys have an opportunity to comment, because we
Sure.
know what yours are, and we'll come back to
No, you don't know. You don't know all my questions yet.
I know. I'm not trying to shut you down
No,
at
that's
all.
fine.
Just, I wanted to make sure these guys get an opportunity.
So I do have some questions. My first question is that when a condition is brought forth, does that open up all conditions of the request? So it only opens up the condition regarding the number of homes?
The affordable housing agreement, the agreement to provide the cost restricted or price restricted or buyer restricted, depending on your perspective on it, correct?
Yeah,
Julie?
I would agree. They're vested for whatever, for the conditions that they have. They're choosing to request a modification to a condition, which does open the door to modernizing the condition across the board. So that would be a call on your part in terms of what's required to be consistent with our housing element.
Okay, because some of the questions that I have are that it's my understanding that this property is not being owned by the person submitting the condition request. And so what does that mean? And do the conditions carry to the new owner? And it says that the expiration life of the map is 2023. Is that based on when the permit is received, or when the drawings are approved, or when ground is broken, or when project is completed?
I'll let Julie do
So
that.
a couple of things. So to answer your first question, I mean, my take on the issue of is it okay for somebody who doesn't own the property to be an applicant in this case is that it's about the property, and obviously the current owner would have to be okay with the application. They have to sign off on the application before it can go forward. It would be along the lines, if somebody leased a property but they're operating a business, something on the property, they could be blessed by the owner to be the applicant, pay for the application, etc. So I don't see a legal issue around the fact that the owner is not the applicant. As far as the lifespan of a map, that is all within the Subdivision Map Act, and there are very specific and complicated statutes that change all the time about how long a tentative map is live before it has to be recorded as a final map, or else they lose their vested entitlement.
Right.
And during the 2008 economic downturn, there were multiple automatic extensions
Yeah.
to maps. That's how we got to this point. And then there's also opportunities for an applicant to request extensions.
Right. And then also, one other critical point here is this was a vesting map. And vesting basically entitled them to the rules and regulations that were prevalent in the county in 2008. So they are basically locked into those rules and regulations and things that were prevalent in the county. Now, the $200,000 price on homes, those were not county-driven conditions, or we didn't create that environment. It was a prevailing market price. So modifying this condition doesn't change the vested rights that they have, because they are basically protected by the rules and standards and regulations that were prevalent in 2008. So with regard to the question as to is it open season to kind of go back and look at some of these other conditions, under normal circumstances, yes, because you modify one condition, you open it up. However, this is a vesting map and not just a regular map. With a regular map, we can do open season, but with a vesting map, I think we are obligated to comply with the rules and regulations. Anything that is tied into our codes and ordinances in 2008 would be respected.
I'd like to comment on Commissioner Fisk's first question. I have seen nothing that indicates that the current owner has joined in this application. We have Exhibit 4 that is the letter from LGI, but nothing from the current owner. And I share Commissioner Fisk's concern that we do need, and I think this is your concern, we do need the blessing of the current owner before we change what the conditions are for the current owner. And if we don't have anything that shows that the current owner has joined in the request, maybe we should condition any resolution that we have upon receipt of such a request within a certain period of time.
I actually
Because
think,
I
I'm sorry
have-
to interrupt, I just think that could be cured by getting a copy of the application
Right.
where the owner has signed off
Signed.
into evidence, if that's what you
but-
wanted.
You've seen this application? The only thing I've seen is Exhibit 4, which is a letter from LGI.
No, and I get applications for initial routing, I don't remember or save them all, so I don't know if I've seen them, but I think that if we wanted to take a recess so that planning could get a copy of the complete application into evidence, we could do that to
That'd be
resolve
good.
that particular issue.
Yeah, that would resolve things for me, I hope for
Okay.
Commissioner Fisk.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
But any agreement would have to be signed by the current owner of record anyway. So wow, that is an interesting point, and it would be nice to have had that explicitly stated in here that the current owner was aware of and in agreement with this application. I think it's an easily enough solved issue.
It certainly is, as if there's an application that has the current owner's representation on it.
The next thing is
it's
that
required.
I wanted to confirm, because I don't believe that I'm seeing it, but a $200,000 home could be a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom. I am not seeing where there are any specifications on the homes that are going to be designated for the low-income housing.
Again,
I think all of us will be discussing that.
Okay, good, then I'm not just pulling stuff out of the air. And then the last thing, I would just like to agree with Commissioner Wooster on the percentage of low-income homes to the number of homes that are being provided in the residential development. I think it's low, so that's all for me.
Everything seems reasonable, what we're discussing here, and I think you've been very thorough. I have nothing more to add.
So I have a few questions. I assume from your comments, Planning Director, that Table 1 and Table 2 in the staff report, all those figures are derived from the housing and community development requirements, right?
Yes, Commissioner, HCD.
Okay. Now, under Table 2, which is the affordable home sales prices, is there any requirement that a low-income buyer with an income of 80% of AMI, which the Housing Community Development treats as area median income, cannot pay less than the price that is listed as affordable? In other words,
No.
you have what the affordable home prices are, but under the current condition, a buyer that's at the 80% level would still only pay $200,000, correct?
With the existing
Yeah, the
with the existing condition.
Commissioner Ladish, I would probably would like to direct you to the paragraph just above Table 1 that identifies the average cost of a home in Calaveras County at $370,000. In looking at what somebody, for a family of 3, family of 4, at 80% AMI, what is affordable to a family of 3 would be $300,000. What
Yes.
is affordable to a family of 4 would be $329,000.
That's fine. But under the current condition, all it requires is low-income people, and 80%
Right.
is low income. So under the current condition, somebody who is a 4-person household with 80% of the area median income would still, under the current condition, pay $200,000 for one of these units, correct?
They could not offer those 5 units for more than $200,000 under the current. And under the modified, they could not offer those units for more than whatever the current, to a particular buyer, which is the confusion here. But the affordable home sales price is based on not paying more than 30 or 35% of the income in housing adjusted for costs of utilities and insurance and things.
The reason I'm raising the question is that the staff report, and again in the resolution, would indicate that, well, because of the changes of prices,
No.
now only people with 60% of the area median income could qualify for the $200,000, and I disagree with those.
No,
figures.
that's not the premise.
Okay.
That's not the premise.
Okay. So the modification would increase the prices of most low-income buyers who have incomes over 60% of AMI.
It would increase the maximum allowable amount, not the price necessarily. Although in practicality, that will probably be the case, but it's only setting the maximum, not the price. We're not
I mean,
telling.
if the developer decided to be generous,
Yes.
they could charge less than what the modified condition would require. Sure. I don't notice any Santa hats over there, but so if the existing condition would permit a buyer with a household of 4 and an income of 80% of AMI to purchase a 3-bedroom house for $200,000, would such a purchase help the county meet the regional housing needs allocation goals?
Absolutely. Any purchase at all would help the county meet its regional housing goal.
But it would help it more if they only pay $200,000
No.
rather than, well, this is my question.
No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. We're talking, the arena numbers are housing, number of housing units that are provided, and it has no connection
With the price.
with the price, yes.
Okay,
Right,
thank you.
and-
I was unclear on that.
Yeah, and the curious thing about arena numbers, if you look at it, is for some strange reason, HCD thinks that we need to provide more above moderate income housing units, 482. So the above moderate housing income units are actually higher than the low income and the moderate income combined. So again, this comes back to the science of determining what category of housing units the county has to provide and why. So it was just curious to me that if we are, considered to be a poor, low-income community, then our arena numbers should kind of reflect that. But at the same time, they wanted to see a balance of production of housing units from the very low end to the very high end, so that everybody who comes into the county can actually purchase homes based on how much money that they can afford to pay for it.
Then, does the staff see any requirement in the current or proposed versions of the condition that the 5 housing units to be sold to low-income buyers must be equivalent in space and quality to other housing units in the subdivision? Or is this just a presumption or assumption?
Well, there's really nothing here specifically, but I understand the premise of your comment, which means can they intentionally build 5 substandard, homes and say, there you go, there's your $200,000 or whatever.
Which I don't
housing
think
units.
was the intention of the
Right.
developer or the county,
Right,
but
right.
I think we need to spell that out.
Right.
We don't have any information on what a recordable agreement looked like for inclusionary affordable housing
Housing.
in 2008 in
No, we
front of
don't.
us.
Yeah,
That would be a curiosity.
it would.
Or if we have a template for inclusionary housing now that we would include as a condition, because I would expect that it would say that they have to be the same homes and they have to be scattered throughout the community
right.
and be a representative sample.
Yes. Now, that is a very tangible comment, because if the Planning Commission is thinking of making any substantive additions to the modified condition 11-9, what chairperson just mentioned might be one of those things that you might want to do, is it has to be comparable in size and quality and so on and so forth. So that it doesn't really stand out as, the cheap housing within a moderate housing priced subdivision. So that might be something that might be of value to include in here to make
And I
sure.
don't think that would be a substantive change. I think it was probably assumed
Yeah,
at the time.
at the time, yes.
And following up on Commissioner Rooster's question, do you see under the proposed changed condition any specification as to how the sales price or resale price is to be determined for the low-income buyers of these 5 properties?
What I implied from that is that the sales price would be determined by the market, by the prevailing market in 2025. So we're going to look at what the AMI is and what the average income is and what the average sales price of our home is. So all those things will be put into consideration at the time, and that is why we don't have any fixed dollar amount in that condition.
Okay, and actually it'd be the affordable home sales prices.
Right, it would be the affordable home sales prices. It could be lower. We might be sitting here 3 years from now with a housing market that looked like it looked back in, the early 2000s when things were, so.
But all of those calculations that you're talking about would be specific to Calaveras County
Yes.
and not a statewide
Oh, no.
HCD.
Mhm, yeah. mhm.
And we're proposing that they would then be indexed for the next 30 years to those same criteria.
Right.
But my question is
I have a-
30 years a typical sunset period for a deed restriction related to affordable housing? I'm wondering where that came from. And I haven't looked at anything in a
I
long
don't
time.
know.
Yeah, deed restrictions.
And
I'm not
to follow up
sure.
on that, my next question was about the index. I don't understand what indexed over 30 years means and why we can't just say, upon the time of a resale, you will consult with the Housing and Community Development statistics on low income and affordable home prices and just go with that rather than, I don't understand what indexed over 30 years means.
I believe that's exactly what they're saying. My experience with affordable housing that is deed restricted is that it just follows HCD's
right.
formulas so that it continues to run with
I
it.
think it'd be,
But I just don't understand what the 30 years,
no,
in my experience, they have been in perpetuity, which I see as a double-edged sword, but I'm not saying I'm in favor or against that, but I'm just curious where it came from.
sooner or later, the rule in Shelley's case.
Actually, I may have an answer for you. I think the 30 years was actually maybe designed to protect the eligibility of the buyers, because if you removed that 30-year clause, it means that after maybe 10, let's say it's 10 years, then the obligation for them to sell to low-income buyers.
No, my
you know,
concern is the opposite.
Yeah.
Is why
Okay.
are we limiting it to 30 years? Why is it
could-
not a permanent deed
we limit
restriction?
it to
Because
just
that's just been my
perpetuity.
experience. in
If we
the
limit it to
past.
30 years,
Right,
then somebody who buys, a low-income person that buys a house, one of these 5 houses, at 29 years and 10 months, could then in 3 months sell it for market price.
Right.
And so I don't see any point in the 30 years.
And that, my concern is that when you do deed restrict it in perpetuity, you take away the ability of that buyer to benefit from
yeah,
the increases in property values the
Right.
way anybody
Else
else can
would.
when prices
Right.
go up. So, but it depends on, it becomes too complex to look at how many times is a property turning over and trying to look at that.
right.
So I'm just not sure what the current state of the art is in
Well,
these
I-
agreements.
Yeah, that's a very valid point.
I'll be suggesting that we just do away with the 30-year limit, because the prices will reflect changes in the prices because the HCD adjusts the affordable housing.
No, it reflects changes in income, has nothing to do with changes in the cost of housing. So, because we have seen run-ups, this is how people build wealth in California, is through property often, because we see run-ups that far exceed increases in income. If you look at those 2 lines, the cost of housing has gone up at a much faster pace than income has. And so
Absolutely.
people who are able to get into purchasing a house benefit by that in a much bigger way. And you take that away from these buyers, they don't have that same upside potential. But on the other hand, they are getting the benefit of being able to purchase that house, and that benefit is being offered to the next person in that same position.
I think
So
that's the key
you
thing.
could argue it any which
Either-
way.
yeah.
I think that's the key
Either way.
thing, is that if we're going to
We're in my bailiwick here.
those are all the questions I have. And for the applicants, I don't know if you've
Yeah.
been listening, but if you could answer as best you can.
So,
But it's up to her to tell you when it's time.
Ms. Mr. Parker,
That's what I don't understand.
do you guys have anything else you'd like to bring up before we, and Commissioner Wooster, before we give the applicant an opportunity to speak?
I don't have anything else.
Well, what I was discussing with Commissioner Fisk is, if not 5 units, then how many? And what do we tie that number to? Is it a reflection of the RENA numbers and our analysis and our compliance level at this particular point, which is something that I think Commissioner Wooster was kind of leaning towards at that time. But if we are going to change the number of housing units to a fixed number, then there needs to be some kind of a science behind that number. I don't know what the science was behind picking 5 out of 156. It doesn't turn out to be 10%. And 5% maybe, it's even lower than 5%. So I don't know what that number was that necessitated the 5, but if we're going to modify that number, I think there should be some kind of a basis for us modifying the number of units at that
Well,
time.
I'm sure we're going to hear from the applicants. And
Absolutely.
I'm going to just say, in my experience, it rarely is proportional to this, because the assumption generally is that in a community there are actually affordable housing developments also being built where 100% of the the units
Units.
in that condominium complex
low
or,
income.
and Habitat is currently looking at a project like that. So and because we have never had a policy to require inclusionary housing in developments, it would be out of the norm for Calaveras County to suddenly decide that we're going to put on the back of one developer,
Right.
providing his full percentage of the housing. But I think that's something we'll all discuss. Are we ready to hear from the applicant? And possibly the owner might be of the property,
Yeah.
might be here, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Before we're going to get to the applicant really quickly, the only other scenario that I know of whereby we specify either a percentage or a fixed number of units would be if the county offered a density bonus. So if we offer a density bonus, we can say, okay, for that number of units that go beyond the density, you make those numbers available to either the elderly, the low income, college students or whatever, and then there'll be an accompanying restriction. In this particular case, I don't understand to be the case, so
It wasn't required under their
it wasn't,
initial.
it wasn't. So
Or we would have a zoning ordinance that would require that all developments provide a
Right,
certain
certain
percentage
number.
of their units or a minimum of this number of units or whatever.
Right.
I mean, a lot of other counties and cities do have
have.
that kind of zoning.
Right.
We don't have that.
No, we don't, but I mean, again, this was in 2008, and I think that that's part of the evolution of what we're doing here is understanding some mistakes that may have been made where we didn't capture things that we should have in order to be able to protect the community members that we have. And I definitely agree that it needs to be a scientific calculation that is borne by every developer that comes in here. And I would assume that it would be done in some type of a commissioner goal situation where we determine that we're going to meet these RHNA goals that we have established something like that. So I was just asking if something had been established in the past and if that was how this number came up, because it's definitely less than 5%, and I'm used to between 5 and 10% of a developer's responsibility being to the community of low income.
I think that'll be great to discuss when our zoning comes to us and in the next housing element, because I agree that we should be doing more.
I would also like to make sure that we consider that if we do increase the amount that they have to provide, that does become onerous because they are going to be selling these units
Right.
at below their costs.
I think there's a discussion to be had about what our new policy should be in the future.
we're talking about this one right now.
And about this project is a different.
But aren't we discussing whether we're going to increase the amount that they?
We will be discussing
Okay,
that.
so I
That's not
can
what we're.
restate my opinion at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause I have one.
I think there'll be a lot of opinions at that time.
I have one.
Come on up and take a few minutes to tell us your thoughts and maybe answer any of the questions you can answer.
So I'm Evan Light, Vice President of Acquisitions for LGI Homes. I just want to start out by thanking the commissioners for their time as well as the planning staff for working diligently to get this to a hearing. So to just answer a few questions on some notes that I took down specifically to what Commissioner Wooster was asking about regarding putting specific pricing in the condition, which I think is kind of how we ended up in this issue in the first place. But HCD sets income limits annually, and upon setting those income limits, they effectively limit the income of the buyer, right? And so that limits how much house they can qualify for. There's indirectly the sales prices are set by that. So we have to have, essentially what happens is there's an agreement that goes on title. When we enter into contract, it's on title and the escrow company has to verify that the buyer's checking all the boxes as far as, family of 4, 3-bedroom house, less than $72,000 worth of income. And by that math, like Commissioner Plotnick stated, they can only qualify for 30 to 35% of their monthly income as their payment. And so in that instance, that's effectively how the prices are set. And because they publish such good data on income, from our opinion and the previous agreements that we've done with other counties or other ones that I've seen, it's all associated with income levels because that is what's set by the HCD. So any other questions regarding that? Because I think if we start talking about pricing and those things, it's going to get a little bit murky, but I think income levels are a very clear way for us to say, we have their W-2s, we know what they made annually, and it's a very, very easy and efficient calculation for us.
Well, would you have any objection to including in the revised condition a statement that the sales price for such a housing unit shall be the affordable home sales price set for that time for Calaveras County by the HCD with respect to that low-income buyer with a specified number of people in the buyer's household?
So I have to be honest, I don't know that affordable housing price is actually, I don't know if that's a supplementary report that came from. All I know is that the HCD sets income limits.
Well, as pointed out by the planning department, table 2 in the staff report is sourced from HCD, and it states the prices for the various income levels and household sizes and home sizes. So such a statement would make it perfectly clear what's.
But I just want to reiterate, if you look there, the sources for HCD are citing table 1. I don't know where table 2 came from. Because I've dove pretty deep into this, and all I've seen is that HCD sets income limits and not affordable. There may be some kind of conversion that's backing into those sales prices, but my understanding is HCD only sets income limits.
Well,
Correct.
I was reassured by the planning department that table 2 is also sourced with HCD.
I think they provide reports showing what the current calculation shows. But I think we could rectify this by just saying the maximum sales price will be determined in accordance with HCD guidelines and not try to distinguish all the little bits and pieces because it might change over the years. And that's exactly where we don't want to end up again.
And I'd like to
Write that down.
just include one more, Commissioner Lattish, one more thing with this also is that part of what contributes to what affordability is interest rates. Interest rates fluctuate throughout the year. And so whatever this sales price is at that snapshot of that time probably made sense. But if, as you know, interest rates have gone up over the last 6 months.
It may have come down.
So the price would have to come down, right? So it's really, if it's set by income limits, it's clear, it's concise, we can work with that. When we get into pricing and interest rates and all these other factors that come in, it makes it more challenging.
We just need to follow the HCD guidelines. I think that's.
I like
yeah.
your language, if you can
Yeah.
remember it.
That sales price will be determined in accordance with HCD, the maximum sales price in accordance with the HCD guidelines at the time.
I had one question about how that works, because is the price going to vary depending upon the number of people in the household of whoever's coming around, or does it vary according to the size of the house? Because
Yes, and that's always been a little bit of a, like, who determines how many people are in their household and what is a household? In California adopted a new definition years back about what a household or a family was. And I think it's something we want to stay out of the middle of.
I thought I saw
And
something where
just
it
follow
talked about
HCD
4.
guidelines.
Didn't I?
No, it's determined by 2, 3, 4, or more.
well, my question
yeah.
is, if you have, say, a 2-bedroom house for sale, and somebody comes in with, and that's like a 3-person household, somebody comes in with lots of kids. Does the price vary on how many kids you have or on the size of the house?
On the number, I think the number of kids you have. Because you have to show that's how that income limitation is set, correct? It's all part of that calculation from HCD.
So I just want to reiterate, I think for the purposes of this, we just need to stay focused on Table 1 because that is data that gets published annually that we can utilize to verify buyer income and household size. And this is in the other agreements, so with deed restrictions, this is how it's all based off of income limits. It never calls out a direct sales price, and I think that's, like we talked about, that's sort of the issue with how we got here in the first place.
And that whole process is above my pay grade. I don't understand how that person is determined and qualified and how they verify that their household is the size they say. And I mean, it's pretty easy to verify the income, but the rest of it might be.
And I believe that HCD has guidelines for all of that as well that our escrow or title officer will have to follow and verify, and that's part of kind of the code of ethics of their job and what they have to do.
Well, it is interesting to me that on Table 2, it at least implies that if you have a 4-person household, you must be purchasing a 3-bedroom house. And I was thinking, well, gee, maybe somebody with 5 persons can't really afford the affordable home sale price that's listed. And so they'll say, no, I want to buy a 1-bedroom house. Well, now that might not be fair to the subdivision itself. You could
Right, and so I think
get to slum-like conditions pretty quickly.
I think you bring up a good point here, though, in that Table 2 has made some assumptions to get to the data that's there. Table 1 is cut and dry. We have, it's based on income limits. We verify income limits. They have to be able to qualify for the payment based on their income limit. It's this is taking into account interest rates and how many, assuming certain people in certain sizes of houses, and that's really, I don't think, the intent of what we're trying to do here.
Would you have any objection to what the chair suggested, that as far as sales price goes, the maximum sales price shall be determined by HCD guidelines in effect at the time of the sale? That seems to be consistent with you, and also has something about sales price in here.
I'm not exactly sure what that means, though, right? The guidelines of Table 2, or what are,
whatever HCD.
Whatever they're using at the time.
Yeah,
Whatever,
at the time.
that's all gonna be in their algorithm. I don't have to understand every little bit of it.
So the concern that I have is, and I'm going to be talking directly to you on this just because you know what I'm talking about, but the low income maximum housing price that we can put on, say, like the Habitat Homes is $392 for a low income family, but yet here it says that the median for average cost of a Calaveras home is $370. And so already the low income maximum price is higher than our county average cost. And so I just want to make sure that we're talking specific to Calaveras County when we're talking about.
We are, and I think the numbers that Habitat are using are a little bit old.
Okay.
Because they started that process back. So I think we probably can't equate this number to what they're in their application. Because like they were explaining, that interest, all sorts of things play into that number at any given moment. Who knows when this table was developed, which is why I don't think we want to get into the weeds on it, but I also don't think we're in a position to create our own algorithm, because
Totally
the
agree.
unintended consequences of some little thing we do is going to end us up with lots of people back here going, wait a minute, it doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Yeah, it's a,
And I'd just like to add that to Commissioner Plotnick's point that, you know, the reason we're here sort of in the first place is that a sales price was included on this condition that doesn't make sense anymore. But I can tell you from my experience and the way our, you know, escrow system works, basing it all off income limit is clear and concise, and we can manage to that. When we start talking about sales prices and how this was derived, it gets murky pretty quickly, so.
right. So we want to comply with California's affordable housing structure. I mean, because that's the only thing we can really hang our hats on at this moment. Is there?
I have a few more.
Yeah.
I know there's questions about the owner consenting. We have email exchanges with Gina, the planner, that basically, she made sure to get his approval before we were able to submit our application. So that's something that they can show you, I'm sure, but he's been on board with this from the beginning. And then just sort of where we're at as a project. So we're essentially complete with our final engineering, and we're about to record the final map to preserve our entitlements and start development next year, start building houses in mid to late 2024 and go to sale in either late 2024, probably early 2025. So that's where things are at, and I just want to say that as far as the number of units goes, I think the one thing from our perspective when we look at a new project and look to purchase a project and develop a project within the county is that we want to have a set of rules, right? That's essentially what the conditions of approval are. A set of rules that we can follow and depend on as we move through the project and do our analysis, right? And so we really came back to Planning Commission in discussions with the planner on this condition, just because even from the planning department's perspective, the $200,000 sales price really didn't make any sense, especially considering that we can't even build a house for $200,000, let alone pay the fees or buy the land or develop the land. And so I just want to say that from our perspective, we're very far down the path on this, and we've invested a lot of money in engineering and are excited to be a part of the community long term here. I'm just concerned that if we start changing the number of units, it's going to affect the feasibility of the project as we assumed originally, and that's going to be very challenging for us. So I think that's all I have to say. I can answer any more questions if anyone has anything.
Well, yeah, I'm still having a little trouble getting my head around some of this. If I understand this right, if I was a family of, say, 5,
Yep.
and I can tell you that it's possible to raise a family of 5 in a 2-bedroom house. That can be done. So I come in and I say, okay, I'm a family of 5, but I'm perfectly happy with a 2-bedroom house. And I have other financial obligations, and that's all I can afford. Can you sell it to that person? Can you sell that 2-bedroom house to that family for the price in Table 2?
So couple things. We don't build two-bedroom houses just for minimum 3, but it's beside the point. And I think you're bringing up another good question, which is murky when you start talking about Table 2 and how many bedrooms and how many households. We're focused. I think the most clear and direct way to write this condition is based on Table 1. And so if your question was, if it's a family of 5, how much house can they afford? Well, it's whatever income earner of 77,800 can afford, right? And so we can run that calculation on whether it's a 3-bedroom, a 4-bedroom, a 5-bedroom house, whatever lot we deed restrict, whatever house we decide to build on that lot. That's the price we're gonna have to sell it at.
Right.
I mean, people are
That's
gonna be
my
having babies
understanding
while they're in that
also.
house, and, but, it sounded like you have done enough planning that you already know the sizes of these homes.
If they're in this.
For the most part. Well, and I think one thing that's probably helpful to discuss too is just a little bit about the company I work for. So LGI Homes, I'm based out of Sacramento and run the Northern California operation. And the focus for us is we're the leader in affordable new homes. So we work with first-time home buyers, converting renters into homeowners. That's our focus. And so inherently, our projects are more affordable than almost all of our competitors. And so when we start talking about affordability and deed restricting, certainly with the RENA numbers and everything, I totally understand the deed restriction process and what needs to happen there. But our focus from the beginning is developing the land and building the homes on quality and on budget to make sure that we're providing a high quality, affordable product to our homeowners. And so I think from the perspective of market rate housing, we are on the affordable side of that spectrum to begin with. And I just want to make that clear as well.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Say all these, well, one of these 5 houses is finished, ready for sale.
Yep.
And you have 3 low-income buyers interested.
Yep.
And one of them is at the 80% of AMI, and 2 of them are at 60% AMI. Now, your sales price, affordable sales price to the 80% person will be higher. So how would you choose among those 3 people? Is it whoever put the first bid in, or?
I'm not in sales, so I can't answer that. But I would think that probably the way that this would get managed is we would figure out perfect example. Let's just talk about a family of 4 at 80% AMI. We would run our calculation at interest rates that time to figure out what can a $72,000 earner afford, and that's what we would advertise the home at.
So I actually have a comment because I had a suggestion.
Just to follow up on that question. But if the 60% person would qualify for a lower price than that 80% person.
And
So if you advertise it at the price for the 80% person, that's, the 60% person says, well, I can't afford that, so I won't even bid. But if the 60% person, say you only had 1 buyer.
Yep.
And it was a 60% person.
Yep.
And you'd advertised it at the 80% price.
Yep.
You would need to sell it
at
at the 60%.
If we only had 1 buyer and we wanted to get closed out of the community, yes. But yeah.
I know you're not in sales, but it's an intriguing
Yeah.
situation, and perhaps you shouldn't advertise at the
Right.
80% level.
Right.
And I know this isn't your department, but
Right.
something to think about down the line.
the solution to that can be taken care of in the recordable agreement. And typically, you determine what percentage of the units will be sold at the 60% level and at the 80% level. So you have a goal for that.
Well, should that be done here? I mean, would we have to put that in the condition?
It doesn't have to be in the, yes, it would be in the condition as something that would need to be included in the agreement, along with things like spreading them throughout and then being of a similar size and quality to other units in the development.
And I just want to add, though, that the original condition states low income. doesn't discuss very low income or anything beyond that. So,
Right.
we've been managing the project to 5 low-income homes at 80% AMI, and that's what our discussions have been with planning. And so that's why when we came here, we figured just a simple modification to remove the sales price
But
was what made sense.
the HCD defines low-income families as families whose income do not exceed 80%.
Correct.
So 60% is still within the low
Correct. So
income.
we could sell to them. That's absolutely correct.
Right.
They would need to
And
qualify
we
though,
wouldn't
right?
be asking them to do very extremely low income at 20 or 40%. Those people are,
Right.
that's not an appropriate goal for us, I don't think. But that is something we can discuss, as there is a way to take care of that, that has been done commonly.
Okay, when you analyze this project and went as far as you did with it, the $200,000 maximum sale price for 5 homes was in existence.
Correct.
It's been there from the beginning.
Correct.
Now, if you figure it was feasible with that limit in place to go ahead, and indirectly or some way, that price is going to be increased. How does that translate if your company were to be in exactly the same position as it is now?
Yeah.
How many additional homes could you add to that 5 and come out the same way?
Well, I think to qualify that a little bit, maybe I was under an incorrect assumption, but I think when we were going through the analysis of the project and speaking with planning, the assumption that was told to me was that this would be pretty rudimentary and make sense and be easily modified. And so here we are, I guess.
There isn't anything easy.
Yeah, so
There's always the opportunity for you to not accept a change in conditions and to continue on with the current condition. And if you, as of the time that they developed this table, that it was still possible to have a $200,000 actually price. That might mean creating 2-bedroom opportunities, but that.
So is that opportunity to not accept the modification after or before the vote?
You can say, after we vote, you can say,
Okay.
no, I'm not interested in completing this process.
Okay.
That's correct. I mean, you're under no obligation to accept what we propose. Is that correct, Julie? I mean,
If you vote to change a condition, the condition is changed when you vote on it. So I
but they
think,
have to enter into an agreement, and if they won't enter into that agreement,
I think that could be problematic because I don't think Public Works is going to record a map that is in substantial compliance with what, yeah. So I think, I mean, if they want to bow out, you can give them it might be easier to give them an opportunity before you actually vote.
You will know what we're going to vote on, so you could say, no, that wouldn't be agreeable to us.
So I guess just before it goes to a vote, I'll have an opportunity to speak.
Yeah,
Okay.
shortly, hopefully.
And I just want to say also to Julie's point that we're right at the finish line of getting this map to the Board of Supervisors in January. So positive or negative, I think we just need a decision from the commission today. We don't really have time for it to roll to a next meeting or
Oh,
anything.
we have no intention for it to roll.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Board of Super, I just want
I think you
to,
guys all agree on
Yeah,
that,
we're
right?
going to get
not-
it done today.
the map is not going to go to the Board of Supervisors unless it's appealed to them. You were saying the Board of Supervisors, I just wanted to make sure you
That's for
understood that.
that's for you're speaking about the condition if it's appealed to them, but the final map approval on the consent agenda of the Board of Supervisors.
Oh, do they do that? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, it's just a consent.
Oh,
agenda
okay,
item.
yeah,
So,
all right.
and even if we voted to change it, you could appeal it to the Board of
Yeah, that's true.
Supervisors and say, yeah, we don't want the change.
Yeah.
Stop.
I think that they're public works items when they go on the agenda, the final maps, I
Yes,
probably don't
they're
ever see
just-
them because it's not my
Correct.
client.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
All right.
Okay,
Okay, well, I'll be back up in a little bit.
sure. Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak to this item today? Annette, there's no one online, right?
No online comment, no.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, seems like there's several items that we need to talk about. I think the very first item is, does the commission want to discuss a change in the number of units required?
Well, I'd like to start off by saying, I think the changes that I'm proposing to the condition, I think are clarifications, not changes. I was not proposing a change in the number. There's a basic question of, what's the county's benefit to approving the price change, to taking the $200,000 out of here? And it seems to me that the county's interested in access of low-income buyers to houses, which with the $200,000 price certainly would increase the access. And although it wouldn't help the county's RENA, is that what you?
Rena?
Numbers. There really is, basically, the change would benefit the developer and nobody else. However, I think as a matter of fairness, we look to what was intended by the condition to start with. And there, I think the 200,000 was probably a reflection of what we would be arriving at today if we applied the HCD guidelines. And if they had been applied back in 2008. So I think as a matter of fairness, I do not have an objection to making a change away from the flat $200,000 figure. I do think we should have some mention of the sales price in here, and I think what was suggested by the chair is very good as far as saying that maximum sales price shall be determined by HCD guidelines in effect for Calaveras County at the time of the sale. That doesn't specifically refer to Table 2 or anything in particular, any particular price, but I think that's consistent with what was intended back in 2008. And I think it was intended under 2008 that it was not to permit the owner to have 5 substandard homes on one low-income cul-de-sac and claim compliance with the condition. But it really wasn't written in there any guarantee that the 5 housing units would be equivalent in space and quality. I think the resale provisions, as I indicated, could be made clearer and without a limitation of 30 years. And so those are the things that I'm suggesting to the changes to the resolution, but I am in favor of, with those changes, approving the deletion of the $200,000 figure and keeping the number of houses that was reached back in 2008 at 5. I think we end up with a resolution that's consistent with the intent, with what was intended in 2008, but was perhaps not artfully stated.
So, I was really trying to get to if we can take the number off the table for further discussion. So I'm trying to get a sense from the rest of the commissioners how you feel about that. So Commissioner Brewster, you brought it up initially.
Well, I brought it up as something I thought the commission ought to consider, because it is so out of whack with what the state's expecting, and it sort of intuitively, it seems pretty low, given the kind of county that we are and the kind of money people can make up here. And I still feel that way. How you come up with a principled way of increasing it is a different question, if you're going to increase it. And I don't want to be unfair to the developer, but my point was, when they come into this with this limit in place and proceed as far as they have, it wouldn't seem to be too much of a harm to have some increase in the number in return for getting the cap lifted. Doesn't have to be a lot, but anything would help. And that's why I was trying to figure out how they could be in the same economic position they are in now, so we're not doing anything to damage them, and increase by some probably small amount the number of affordable units.
Commissioner Worcester, I'm sorry if I'm going out of term here. I just did a quick calculation. If we used 5% of the number of existing proposed units, which is 156, it would be 7.8 units. About 8 units would be, if you went with 5%, you're looking at about 8 units. Does that seem to be enough of a progression for you to go from 5 to 8?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know where 5% comes from. I mean, it doesn't tie to the savings a developer would realize from removing the $200,000 limit. And I don't know what else to tie it to, because if you go to the RENA numbers, you're up at 40%, which is, I think, clearly not
Way
doable,
too high, yeah.
and nothing I would suggest. And so somewhere in between 3.2% and 40%,
There's a
how do you
number.
pick that number, you know?
So, I'm following right along with it. I have the same thoughts, but I'd like to hear what Commissioner Fisk and Parker are thinking, because if most of the commission just want to leave it at 5, then there's no reason for us to discuss it any further.
Well, I agree that there's a benefit being made here, and I would like to even that a little bit. I was trying to look on the housing community development to see if there is a developer industry standard that has a percentage of developments. You know, I'm sure larger developments are going to be under different criteria than smaller developments. I like the 5% as well. I think it's a fair number, but I'm trying to find something to back that up.
I think I see 5 and 10 as numbers that get bandied about.
Yeah.
I haven't done a look at how many projects are done with what numbers, but Commissioner Parker.
Okay. So here's what my concern is. You know, we need the housing first off, because there isn't really any place for people to live around here. I know, at least in our area, and I live where these folks are wanting to build. And I just worry that it becomes, first off, this project was started in '08. And I know, because I've tried to do things here, it takes a long, long time to get anything done. And then we had the big debacle with the housing. So this thing's starting to get moving. And I don't know, I feel like moving forward, we should implement that new policy of, you know, a higher standard. But I think what ends up happening here, if we raise it for these folks, is it's a give and take, okay? So if we force them to do 8 houses instead of 5, they have to make that up somewhere. So it's gonna be on the other end when they retail the house to the other people, which 2 things could happen. It makes those houses less affordable, which defeats the purpose. And second, it could preclude them from even be able to do the project, right? I mean, if we make it too onerous, they can't make money, they won't move forward with the project, it defeats the whole principle. I think to force them to have to increase when they purchase the project based on, now I understand they are gonna gain, okay, but is that a bad thing? Because we're gonna gain too. We're gonna gain housing, which we need, and it's in an area where it is high dense. Everything around that area is high density. It's not rural 5-acre parcels. And these are not, obviously, right? It's on 30 some odd acres. So I just think that that needs to be considered in our decision. You know, it's a win for both of us if they do this. It's a win for them, and it is a win for us because we need the units. And I just think that it could potentially force them to have to raise the price on the houses that aren't low income. And that defeats the purpose in my mind. So moving forward, I agree that we should add more, but for this particular project, I don't think it's beneficial to all of us.
I think Commissioner Parker's comments are very good, and I think the approach I would like to take is to try to clarify the condition to meet the expectations that were actually attempting to be met back in 2008, and also by clarification, just in case the developer LGI Homes decides to pass this project on to somebody else with less principles, to protect those assumptions from 2008 as clarified in our resolution, to protect them so that there aren't abuses with the cul-de-sac of 5 substandard homes, et cetera. So I agree with Commissioner Parker and that this is supposed to be an affordable subdivision, first home buyers. And we don't want first home buyers to be priced out by what we do today.
And I think spreading the units out through the project makes perfect sense, because you definitely don't want to have, it devalues the whole community by doing that. So I think we're all in agreement on that. And then, you know, building like in kind properties makes perfect sense. I think that should be stated in there. Can't be a lower quality unit. And guess what? It's expensive to build. I mean, it is very expensive to build. And they're not a nonprofit. They're, you know, they're in business to make money, as anybody that is in business is, you know, trying to make a living in this tough environment that we live in. And I think all those things need to be considered.
So, right off the bat, I am in favor of modifying this condition because I think it doesn't make sense to have something tied to a numerical value. It needs to be based on a calculation and something that we can use going forward. But the outcome of making that change is going to be a benefit to the developer, a moderate benefit. It's not like they're going to make a killing off the change in the price of 5 or 10 units even. That's not going to make all the difference in the world here. And so I would like to find a balance that makes sense and something that we can look to in the future as this is how we look at these projects. And so I would be very comfortable with increasing the number to 5%, which I believe is, I'm going to believe Gabriel, that's 7.8 units, 8 units. And also allowing for the increased cost tied to HCD's numbers, just the way we've done it. And I'm also fine also with not requiring that some of the units be at the available to 80% income buyers versus 60%. I think allowing it all the way up to 80%, I think your biggest buyer pool is in that 70, 80% range anyway. And I think providing even 3 more possible homes to them would be a benefit to our community. I also think that these guys are going to be, if we're looking at our arena numbers, that they're going to be building in this moderate income range anyway, providing that additional housing not at the top of the range, which is where most of our most recent housing has been built. So I'm on board with everything else, simplifying the language, having that mix throughout the development, and having it be of an equivalent quality. So that's just my thought. So let's see, how does everybody feel about that as a direction?
Well, you were first asking about the increasing the number, and I'm not in favor of increasing the number for this particular development, given what was provided back in 2008, and on my basis that I'd like to clarify, not change.
I agree with the chairperson.
I also agree, and I wanted to get clarification. I know that the gentleman talked about first-time buyers and that that's their goal, but I didn't recognize that this entire development is under that.
I don't think they can't limit it. So I'd actually like you to step back up too, because you kind of alluded to something that's been in the back of my mind and that I think has something to do with some of the other things we've discussed, which is I would imagine that most of your buyers are financing. These are not people coming in with cash for the most part, although they could be, right? And so a lot of them are going to be making use of different programs that are also going to encourage them not to put 10 people in a single bedroom house, right?
Yeah.
Because if they're using any of the California sponsored mortgage house, So do you see that a lot of your buyers actually are making use of first-time buyer programs or other special programs?
Yeah, so primarily we do a lot of USDA 0% down VA loans, as well as FHA 3.5% down programs. But I think just in general, talking about the home building landscape might be helpful to understand. A lot of our competitors, especially that are kind of in move-up product, they look at a lot in a community, and they want to build a 2,500 to 4,000 square foot house to sell it for as much as possible to make as much profit possible. For us, we're looking to convert renters to homeowners. So rather than building 2,500 to 4,000 square feet, our typical home sizes are 1,200 to 2,200. And so inherently, the price is lower. We also are more heavily involved in, our sales reps are more trained in, how do I put this? Mortgage training, sometimes it's credit counseling, things. Our sales team likes to say it's not if you're gonna buy an LGI home, but when. So we have a lot of people that come in, they can't qualify. We help them, pay off a loan or give them some homework to do so that they can come in and qualify later. And so that's all part of our system, and part of what makes us the leader in affordable homes, I think, is the biggest thing. We will build smaller houses to get more people to be able to qualify, and that's our focus, is what can we do to get qualified buyers. So
I think at this point, 2 things need to be clarified. Whoops, am I on? Yeah. First, whether Commissioner Wooster would be happy with a 5% increase, or 5%, not 5% increase.
Yes,
but
I
the
agreed with the chairperson
Okay.
on that, and Commissioner Fisk.
Then the writing's on the wall on that, as far as if we continue processing this request, you're going to come up with an increased number of homes. So the question is up to you, and we could take a break if you needed to check with somebody as to whether or not you want to continue with the process.
I think if we did 5%, and we're happy to add the language like you guys discussed, where it's dispersed throughout the community, and we're not same finishes and quality as the rest of the community, I think we can make that work. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else, any other issues related to this condition?
Well, I think it was indicated that if we took a break, while planning could come up with an application or some indication that the owner joins in on this.
In my experience, the owner has to sign the application,
Well,
so,
at least.
but we can confirm that. Could, Annette, maybe you could check with somebody in planning, take a look at the application and get back to us.
Gina Catherine would be the person.
I do have an answer. There wasn't actually an application because it was just a modification. But I do have a letter that gives permission. If you'd like to see it, I could try to share it.
That'd be fantastic.
If the letter has the owner's blessing on this.
Let's see if I can do this. For some reason, it's not popping up. Let me.
While she looks for that, oh, she's got it.
I think maybe you could read it aloud. I'm having a hard time.
It says, "Hi Gina, I received an email from Evan Litch about you needing my authorization of the request to change the condition regarding affordable housing 11-9. This is approved from me. Let me know if this is sufficient. Thank you, Cameron Pringle."
Okay, and he's of VSP Lots LLC?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we had one other lingering item, which was the 30-year term on the deed restriction, whether we would want to have a 30-year term or whether we would want to remove it and have the deed restriction run in perpetuity.
Well, I think we'll have some other questions about the resolution too, but
Yeah, but well, this is, I'm just
I'd
trying to
say
get the big
let's
topics
take-
we were discussing.
let's take
so-
the indexed and 30-year term out of it and put in the specific requirements.
So, the
I don't
30
have a
years.
strong feeling on whether
Okay.
it's 30 years or in perpetuity. I tend not to like things in perpetuity because that's a really long time.
I know.
But I don't know what the rationale was for 30. But whatever it was, I don't
Whoever
know that,
owns it at 29 and a half years.
well, whatever it was,
Lift them
I,
out of poverty too, by the way, if it was lifted, so
Well,
they
they-
can sell it at 30 years and they're no longer impoverished, so.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I
So it's a
see-
double-edged
I can see
sword,
an
just like you
argument
said,
either
right?
And there'll be
way.
one
And I
more
always
family
wanna lift
that
people out of
can't,
poverty, so.
there'll be one more family that can't afford to buy a house.
Yeah.
I think that house would turn over more often too if it's in perpetuity because, you know, there's no benefit to stay in that house, so it's gonna turn over more often because they're gonna wanna move into something that can lift them out of poverty, so.
And I think that's why I agree with it, because I think that it gives people that opportunity to get their feet on the ground, do what it's meant to do, and then go somewhere else, and then leave that house open to our lower income opportunities to then someone else to start up again.
So you would be in favor of having it stay forever? You're mixed.
I'm not gonna die on that hill.
Yeah, okay. I feel kind of the same way. I wouldn't die on that hill.
I think it should be
You would like
remain,
to
but
see it
I-
remain,
yeah,
okay.
I'd like to see
Then
it
I-
remain also, but.
So I'm for
Commissioner
perpetuity.
Brewster.
I'm not sure what when we say remain, what we're
That,
talking.
that we remove the 30-year limitation.
I would remove that.
that's okay.
Okay, so we'd like to get rid of the 30-year. Okay, now we have to get to the crafting of the wording. I assume you guys don't feel strongly on the 30-year.
I think it makes sense for the decision. You're right.
Okay, So, language.
I do, you received a couple of pages from me as far as proposed resolution changes. And it might be easiest to go through them and you to butcher what I've suggested, if needed. So now we're going to be looking at the resolution as revised on Wednesday by Gina. So my number one, now we have the owners joining in the request. So my number one would be joined by Cameron Pringle of landowner of ESP Lots LLC. And I think this is important to clarify that there is full standing for this request to come before the county.
I'm fine with that. I assume you guys are all good with
Yeah,
that.
it's okay.
Great.
And my number two, we don't have in the resolution anything of what low-income families means. And so I would be adding a new whereas clause, not substituting it for anything. Whereas the California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD, has defined low-income families as, quote, families whose incomes do not exceed 80% of the median family income for the area. And I do have a copy of a sheet from HCD that quote is derived from.
I'm fine with that. I think I went looking for it too, and I found it only in the discussion, so.
That's fine.
So the next whereas clause, which was the second one and now would be the third, would be whereas condition 2-9 of the January 22nd, 2008 resolution limits the sales price of 5 homes to $200,000, which is currently below the HCD's affordable sales price for most categories of homes for buyers with 60% of the county's area median income, AMI.
Commissioner Laddish, is there a reason why you used 60% and not 80%?
Just to draw attention to the fact that the $200,000 is a very low figure now.
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
That's the only
agree.
reason.
Right, okay.
I'm not trying to limit it to.
I get it.
The only comment I would have on that is the resolution says it limits the average sales price.
Let's see, where are you
The
looking at?
current resolution, the current condition, 2-9, says the applicant will enter into a recordable agreement with the county to commit 5 housing units to be sold at an average sales price.
I would think we wouldn't want that because how do you know what that average sales price until you've sold them all?
Well, that's what I'm wondering, whether that makes sense.
Well,
Yeah.
but we're
But
going
that's
to get
what
rid
we're,
of the 200,000. Maybe I'm missing something here. You know,
it doesn't,
I'm
He's just
I'm
saying
just
if you're
trying to
going
read.
to correct this, the wording that you're already correcting, you could correct it further to say
Yeah.
an average sales price of 200,000.
Okay,
yeah,
so,
Limits just add average in there.
yeah, if you
Yeah,
want to be faithful
okay.
to what the current condition
Sure.
is.
Yeah.
right, okay, great. So limits the average sales price of 5 homes. All right. Now, my fourth suggestion is under the evidence paragraph under finding 2. The proposed evidence paragraph, I'm talking about a sentence that starts with relying on. Relying on a specific selling price does not account for inflation, semicolon, thus limiting the eligibility of low-income buyers to only those falling below 60% AMI. I think the planning director agreed with me that that's that's not accurate. So I would just, I would change, after the word inflation in that sentence, I would add since 2008,
Yeah,
and then eliminate the rest of that sentence.
I agree.
I agree.
Everybody.
So then we get down to the condition itself. Now, maybe we ought to stop at this point and see if anybody else has suggestions for changes up till there in the resolution.
I don't.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Leave this to the wordsmiths.
Yeah.
Okay, so in one of the handouts I gave you, it had two versions of my proposed condition, and I know we'll be having some changes to this. The first one shows cross-outs from the one that was proposed in the first resolution, and italics for what I would add to that proposed resolution. I find that to be kind of confusing to look at, and so I represented it with a version without the crossouts or italics, and that's the version that was printed in my resolution changes pages. So everybody have a chance to look at that, and I would suggest, consistent with the discussion we had earlier, that the sentence that starts down at the end of the page on the resolution changes handout starts with the sales price for such a housing unit, that we substitute the language, the maximum sales price shall be determined by HCD guidelines in effect for Calaveras County at the time of the sale. I do think we need to have something in there about sales price, and I think this is a provision suggested by the chair that will roll with the times and be applicable in perpetuity for that matter, as long as there's an HCD.
Can I just ask one question? Do you want to say recorded instead of recordable? Because anything is recordable.
Yeah, I just laughed at that. That's why I was saying it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you don't enter into it before it's recorded, so I think that's, okay. But I'm open to any suggestions there.
Agreement to be recorded.
Agreement to be recorded, that's good.
And so Commissioner Laddish, when it says home sales price set for that time for Calaveras County by HCD with respect to that low income AMI instead of the buyer with specified number of people in the household?
We take all of that
I'll
out.
take that whole sentence of mine that starts with sales price and eliminate it and replace it with the language that I was suggesting.
Oh, I thought that
that
was your
I was
suggestion.
Following along with a great suggestion of the chair.
Resuggested.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then I would just want to change the committed 5 to 8 housing units up at the
Yeah,
top.
or 5%
5%
of
of
the
the
housing
total.
units.
Okay.
Yeah, 5% of the total housing units.
So 5% of the total housing units.
Right. And I would like to add somewhere the distributed throughout the subdivision.
Okay, but
So
good.
equivalent in space and quality, other housing units in the subdivision
And-
and distributed.
Evenly throughout.
Yeah, I don't even, right,
So
throughout the development,
Housing units distributed throughout the subdivision.
yeah.
Julie's writing this down, so we need to have clear direction. What
Just a clarification, Commissioner Laddish, are we going by your revised conditions on page 1 of this one-page sheet, or page 2 of the multiple-page sheets that you gave?
The language is the same on both of those, but I'm looking at the resolution changes, which I think is a double-sided one-page sheet for you.
Yeah, I'm
So this
marking
one.
up his, although it's not, yeah.
Right, okay.
Okay, so what are we going to say about the dispersal? How about
I just added and distributed throughout the development
okay.
after subdivision, just because we've used the word subdivision many times.
Distributed throughout. Yeah, that's wonderful. That was a concern I had, and I didn't get that in there.
And then I think deed restrictions will be placed on the units. Yeah, I think that's okay. And how do you guys feel about that?
That last sentence.
That sounds.
Can I read a draft to make sure that I've got it?
Yes,
right?
please.
Okay. Prior to approval of a final subdivision map, the applicant or its successor will enter into an agreement to be recorded with the county to commit 5% of the total housing units equivalent in space and quality to other housing units in the subdivision and distributed throughout the subdivision to be sold to low-income buyers as determined for that time, to be, oh, sorry, let me just say.
To be determined at that time?
By, how about the, okay, to be, under standards set for Calaveras County by the California Department of Housing and Community Development, and then it maybe add a sentence, the maximum sales price of the affordable units will be determined by HCD guidelines in place at the time of sale. So we're adding that sentence to the existing. And then deed restrictions will be placed on the units so that resale prices to future buyers will be determined in the same way as of the time of the resale, with sales limited to buyers meeting low-income units as set for that time by HCD.
Works for me.
Okay.
Anybody have any?
I love it.
You rarely hear that, don't you?
So,
Progress.
do you guys have any comments or concerns about that?
Please have 1 minute.
Sure.
I'll start a timer.
While they're talking, I just want to make clear that because this was a, oh, never mind.
So I apologize if we're wasting everybody's time, but we're going to pull this from consideration and not go to a vote. So
Okay.
I apologize if I felt like wasting your time, but yeah. So we'll just leave it as is and move forward as is.
Okay.
So.
Simple math.
Well, we've got some great language for future consideration.
Yeah, well, maybe we, I know we want to continue to do business long-term here, so maybe on the next one, that language will help us, but. So,
But you've already run your numbers based on what you know.
we ran our numbers based on what we know, and we think we're worse off than before, so, but, it's a math problem for us, so.
Okay, good
All right.
luck with your project.
All righty.
I
Sorry.
think we can assume that the owner would agree with the withdrawal.
Yes. All right, thank you.
Take care.
Oh, what I was saying was that since this was an extrajudicial issue, I wasn't able to discuss with the planning department all my concerns and stuff beforehand. I didn't want you to think I was just building up to pounce on them.
That's fine, that's fine.
It seems to me that this is kind of a pattern.
Wait a
that
minute, let
this-
me-
This county has had where it's kind of crushes things. It's kind of frustrating to me because, yeah, it's just my experience. And that's
We
why I
didn't
like
crush
to,
it, the project's going forward.
we'll see. Hopefully it does. It's, you know, the cost per square foot of a house has gone up significantly and it continues to go up.
This is an off,
Okay.
probably.
Are we
That's-
closing the public hearing since the
Yeah.
applicant?
Exactly,
And
we
that's-
didn't
Okay,
even,
that's fine.
we,
Yeah, so I guess.
so does any member of the public have any comments on this item? Is,
No online public
yeah,
comment.
so we will close the public comment portion of the hearing. And there's no reason for us to vote on the item
No.
because the applicant has officially withdrawn their request.
Yeah, so the minutes should just reflect that the item, that the application was abandoned or was
Yes.
rescinded by the applicant.
Okay,
But there really was never an application, right? So was that something that I missed, that I mean,
We need to deal with that internally. There
a
was
process question.
Yeah.
Corey's good with forms and process. So informational items, we have none. Are there any commissioner reports?
Happy holidays.
Any planning director reports in addition to the earlier staff report?
Oh, yes. Madam Chair, there are no reports pertaining to projects. Just want to thank you for your diligence over the year and hope that everybody has a happy holiday season and hope to see you next year.
Thank you. And we are officially adjourned at 11:12.